Welcome to What's Trending with Tire Review, presented by AAPEX. I'm Maddie Weiner, and on today's podcast, we're joined by Scott Sloan, Global Ag and LSW Product Manager at Titan International, makers of Goodyear Farm Tires. Scott is a 30-plus year tire industry veteran who has worked to spread best practices around ag tire care and maintenance. So, Scott, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate being on.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for joining us. Now, today I'd like to do a deep dive into some ag tire technology, notably IF and VF technology. IF stands for increased flexion and VF stands for very high flexion. But for those maybe listening that aren't super familiar with these terms or maybe have heard them but don't necessarily totally understand them, can you describe what those two technologies mean?
Well, that's funny you say that because the technology itself is actually probably going on about 25 years. That's how long IF and VF technology has been around. And you're right, IF stands for increased flexion and VF stands for very high flexion. And essentially what that is, it's a deflection technology. I always like to explain it that if you got a conventional tire that carries 100 PS or 100 pounds at 100 PSI, with an IF tire, you can actually carry that same 100 pounds at 20% less inflation pressure, so at 80 psi. VF is actually, instead of 100 psi, you can carry it at 60 psi or 40%. So IF is a 20% reduction in inflation pressure, and VF is actually 40. So it allows manufacturers to be able to run, higher loads at lower inflation pressures. And it was kind of driven out of the sprayer market. The self-propelled sprayer is kind of where it was really first introduced.
Okay, very interesting, very interesting. So obviously load and inflation are a big part of optimizing the ag tire technology for farmers and dealers, but I know IF and VF technology is an investment. I mean, the tires are a little bit more expensive than a regular ag tire. So how can dealers help their ag tire customers optimize their investment in these types of tires?
Well, and I'll be perfectly honest. There's a place and a time and a machine for IF and VF, and you're absolutely right.
Okay.
It does. It costs more, right? And I try and we do a lot of training, and we were talking a little bit earlier that we just had 300 of our dealers in and service guys in training them on this very topic. And the IF and VF technology works great for the applications where the tire is actually operating in the higher end of its inflation pressure range. I
Okay.
mentioned self-propelled sprayers. The conventional tire is a 380 90 R46, and it was a 168 load index was the industry standard, but that was at 78 psi, which is extremely high inflation pressure for an ag application. And
Mm-hmm.
so with the advent of IF and VF, we were able to drive those inflation pressures down to 64, 49 psi to be able to carry that same 12,300 is what 168 is, but that same load, but at a lower inflation pressure. And that's pretty significant. But where it may not be as much of a value, and you can debate it, but a conventional tire that already runs at 6 psi, if you based off of the load tables,
Yeah.
there's really no reason to spend an extra 25% on the tire when you can't get one more psi of inflation pressure out of the tire. So that's not really a value, and that's where we got to really, farmers don't really understand it. Even some tire dealers have trouble understanding it. OEs definitely have trouble understanding that.
Mm-hmm.
They're offering this stuff on tractors that don't necessarily need it. So that's where we go in and just make sure that they're getting a value for the extra that it takes to purchase a IF or VF tire.
So just hypothetically, if I were a tire dealer, if I had a customer that, I mean, from what you're saying, IF and VF technology allows for a little bit more tire longevity when carrying those heavy loads. Is that right? Or am
Well,
I
no, not necessarily.
off base? Okay.
So again, IF and VF is a deflection technology. So from a longevity standpoint, the tires are, whether they're conventional IF or VF, the longevity is basically the same, if not, similar, if not the
Oh,
same.
okay.
And but the applications that these go into, again, self-propelled sprayers, where they're the higher loads and smaller air chambers, combines, grain
Mm,
carts, these things. You got
yeah,
these new X9s are out on the field. We've weighed them up at over 100,000 pounds. So that's a big machine with tires, and you got to have a lot of air in there. So if you can reduce that inflation pressure from say 50 psi to 30 psi, that's pretty significant on on like a combine application. Where
I
again,
gotcha.
a mechanical front wheel drive tractor, they're running in the anywhere from the 9 to 12 psi range. Is it really worth 25% to throw some IF or VF tires on there? I don't know. You could say that it is, but we're trying to sell tires, but at least we want to make sure they're getting the right tire for the right job.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And now, correct me if I'm wrong, but this technology really, because inflation pressures are so important, um, obviously, and well, I guess in any application they are, but with these tires, it seems like obviously you really have to pay attention to that inflation pressure. So to me, that signals, hey, that's an opportunity for a tire dealer to kind of be that educational consultant and work
Yeah,
with
no, you're you
a
you
farmer
are you're
customer.
you're
Okay.
you're absolutely right. I mean, and that's what we teach is when these people come in and I talk to a bunch of people, and I can give them the whole spiel on IF and VF, and they're totally impressed with it, but they're not going to run out and change every tire on their farm to IF and VF tires, right?
Yeah.
We'll be really realistic about that. But what they can do, and what we're training our dealers to do, is whatever they have on their farm now. I think they'd be very surprised at what they can run their inflation pressures at. They're probably already overinflated on their conventional tires. A tire that you could be running at 6 psi, maybe they're running at 22 psi.
Hmm.
Um, just knowing that they can gain on that's a huge advantage to that farmer if they understand that they could be running that much lower, as opposed to they could buy that IF or VF tire and they still might be running it at 20 psi. So if you're not managing it, it's not a value. And
I gotcha.
that's the hardest part with farmers. I always kind of kid, how often do you check inflation pressures, right? I mean, you get up in the morning, you check the gas and the oil. Do you check the air in the tires? And they all kind of laugh, and it's usually once a season when they roll the whatever piece of equipment out of the shed. They
Hmm.
stick a tire gauge over. If it doesn't, well, that doesn't look so bad. We'll go ahead and run it. But when it starts running low, well, what do they do? 90% of the people look at the side of the wall of the tire, and it says max inflation 35 psi or whatever it is, and fill that tire up to max inflation pressure when they could probably be running at 9 psi. It's just there's just a very big disconnect between the farmer and what he thinks the tire should look like, and that's where our dealer network is very important in educating those end users. And we go out and we hold a lot of seminars with end users just for that fact. And IF and VF are great, and I always tell people we handle it and we sell it. But
Hmm.
if you really look at your operation, you could probably be doing yourself a big favor just by managing it. But it's a very hard thing to get through people's head because it's just not on everybody's mind all day long.
Right. I understand that. Yeah. No, it makes sense. And then, so you talked about dealers being the sort of educational consultant sort of, person to help run a farm's or a tire program, for lack of a better
Right.
word,
Exactly.
with a farmer. But for the farmer, what advantages do IF and VF tires yield for them? I know soil compaction is a thing I hear a lot
Well,
in the ag tire
exactly, and
industry.
that is exactly the whole concept between for IF and VF is if you let air out of the tire, the tire footprint grows, right? So you're carrying the same load, but it's over a larger footprint, right? So that's more square inches on the ground, which equates to less ground bearing pressure, which then equates to less compaction. And that's the whole name of the game is trying to put as little pressure on the soil as you possibly can throughout the season. And a few pounds of air here and there can make a, possibly make a big difference. And then, again, it's just all about understanding it and managing it.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, great advice for dealers and farmers out there. So, Scott, there are other abbreviations that exist when it comes to ag tire technology. For Titan in particular, I know LSW is one, meaning low sidewall. It's sort of a newer-ish innovation. So, can you describe what that means and how it works?
Well, yeah, newer-ish. It's funny because, like I said, we had all these people, and you kind of tell the history of LSW, which is low sidewall. I
Hmm.
actually built the first LSW prototype back in 1997 at
Oh,
this
wow.
factory. So that's how long I've been dealing with LSW. So it's relatively new on the success side, but on the development side, we've been dealing with this for a long time. And the good thing is that, I always kid, we've got a mold storage area full of great ideas. You try something, it doesn't work, and it's been a little work in progress. But yeah, honestly, LSW as we see it today has really been in the market since about 2010,
Okay.
2011 is when we really kind of came into the ag industry with it. And low sidewall, it means low sidewall. So if you took like a if you remember pickup truck tires or truck tires, they used to be 15 or 16 inches in the rim diameter.
Right.
And over the course of time in the years, they went from 15, 16, 18. I've got 20-inch wheels on my truck now, but the OD of the tire has really remained pretty much the same. It hasn't grown. And what happens is that sidewall shrinks down, and that adds a attribute or a performance enhancement characteristic, stability, handling, those type of characteristics to the vehicle. So we basically took that, since we make the wheels, right?
Hmm.
We make a lot of wheels in the course of a year, but we make the wheels. We can make the wheels any size we want or any configuration we want. So we were able to take the very first big size for us was an 870R38, which is a very common four-wheel drive dual tire. It's very common in the marketplace, and we took about 20% out of the sidewall, and we went from an 870/38 to an 855/46. And that was the very first tire that we spotted a set of tires in Marengo, Illinois back in 2009. And those tires are actually still running on the third tractor for that end user.
Oh,
So it's
wow.
been pretty successful. And then we've developed, as we've gone through, we've developed 1100s and 1250s, and we got the world's largest ag tire at the 1400 30R46. But that lower sidewall helps with a lot of things. It helps, when if you think about the sidewall of a tire as a spring, right? It's got this
Right,
big long
exactly.
spring, and you're roading a tractor, and these guys are roading further and further every year. They buy a piece of land over here, and so they're traveling between the farms a lot more now. But the problem is with the tires that are on there now, the conventional tires, you got such a long spring, and you get this harmonic road lope,
Oh,
right?
okay.
So
Yep.
you're going 25, 26 miles an hour, and you got a 55,000 pound vehicle, and it starts to bounce basically off the road. It's kind of an unnervy feeling, right? So you got
Hmm.
to slow the tractor down and settle the tires down. And in some cases, they'll actually pump air into the tire to dampen that spring, right?
Got it. Yep.
So basically it shortens that spring, and then that's
Right.
how they get out of power or road lope. Well,
Hmm.
you go back to now, just kind of circling back to IF and VF. You spent 20% more on IF or VF tires to get that lower inflation pressure. Now you're putting air right back into it to solve a day-to-day problem of road loping.
Hmm.
So you just lost everything that you thought you gained by doing that. With LSWs, those tires are actually VF tires. We use VF load tables when we develop these, but with that lower sidewall, the tire's physically different, and we're able to lower or dampen that effect physically because the
Okay.
sidewall is physically shorter, and we can still run those lower inflation pressures without that hopping because we built in the dampening effect, and that's been that's been the key to the whole thing is, everybody's got IF and VF, but the size of the tires and the sidewall, has changed on ours that makes it capable of doing the things it's supposed to do and still running those lower inflation pressures. The other
Got
issue
it.
too is power hop. So
Yes.
power hop is when you get under a high drawbar application, and you're out, fall or spring tillage, and what happens is those lugs will hook up and grip, and as it rolls through the footprint, those sidewalls actually buckle like we've all seen slow motion of a dragster tire taking off and how its sidewall buckles.
Right.
A tractor tire does the exact same thing, but in this case, when it straightens out, it actually explodes, and so you get this. It grips, lets go, and power hops. So that's where that power hop actually comes to into play. And I've seen videos where the tractors are practically jumping off the ground. I mean, it's so bad.
Oh, wow. Oh, my.
So what people do, what tire dealers do, is we actually add air. We pump air into the tire, right? We stiffen that sidewall up so it doesn't buckle as much,
Right.
creates more slip because it's not gripping, and you're able to eliminate power hop. Now I go back to my IF and VF conversation is, well, you just spent all this money on IF and VF, and now you got to put air in the tire again to resolve a common everyday power hop issue. LSW, shorter sidewall, doesn't buckle. We can still run the inflation pressures the way they are at the lower inflation pressures, and it's a win-win. So it's been extremely successful with that concept. And, we actually have done a lot of work versus Trax. Trax is going to put the tire business out of business. I've been hearing that for 30 years, literally.
Yeah.
But we're still here. And, but we've done a lot of field demos where we run a track machine versus an LSW machine versus a conventional tired machine.
Okay.
And every time we've run those trials, the track and the LSW are literally head to head, and the conventional machine is a machine and implement or two behind the track and the LSW because it's sitting there bouncing and hopping,
Right.
and they can't put the power to the ground. So it's been a huge success, and we're on all the OEs, and it's really taken off. It's really taken off, and you're right. In the last 5-6 years, it's really taken off for us.
That's interesting. Yeah, I know I've seen it more, so I guess that's why I said that. But
it's funny you say that because we used to go to shows, all the indoor shows and outdoor shows, and you would have to sit there and explain what LSW was, and now what is it? Will it fit on my machine, or do you have something to fit on my machine? So we're kind of beyond that, the discovery phase of this. Now we're into the, people are really going after it, and it's kind of a funny phenomenon because you walk into a show and maybe a grower comes in that's got some 1250s on his combine or something, and he's just kind of coming in and hanging out with the boys, and then some guy comes in to look for 1250s or something for his combine, and those two start talking, and we just kind of step back, and basically it's selling itself now. So it's been a fun journey for me because you start out at a skid steer tire back in '97.
Right.
And now, people know what LSW actually is. So it's been a pretty cool ride.
Yeah, very cool. That's really interesting. And now Titan has another exclusive technology, UFT, Ultimate Flex technology. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. So can you explain that as well a little bit?
So I always kid because I've been in the industry so long that we've really messed up this industry as far as making it complicated. and all of these governing bodies like Tire and Rim and ETRTO and all these guys and again, I always say they're just a group of very smart people that create all these inflation tables and everything that we all work by, right? All the rules. But there's so many of them, right? You've got 380 90R46, right?
Yeah, right.
So that started out as a conventional tire, right? And then we moved to IF, and then we moved to VF. So now out running around in the marketplace, we have 3 versions of the same tire. Okay, 380 90R46, right? So our poor tire dealers are out there. They have to manage basically 3 different inventories, right? Because you don't know if the next sprayer that rolls in is going to roll in with a conventional tire that you pump up to 78 psi, or an IF tire that you pump up to 64 psi, or a VF tire that you pump up to 49 psi, right?
Yeah.
So from a management standpoint, it's just ridiculous. We got 3-to-1 for the same exact position, right? So what we did is we developed a tire that whatever rolls into the shop. So on the side of the tire, it can run as a VF tire, it can run as an IF tire, or it can run as a conventional tire. And
Oh, okay.
so literally, our dealers or even the OEs, all they have to do is manage one inventory, and whatever machine rolls in, they set it up to, if a machine with conventional tire rolls in, they pull a UFT tire out of inventory and set up right with the other conventional tires, if they're IF or if they're VF. That way, instead of having three different versions of the same tire, they just have one tire now. So, and then
Oh,
for us,
okay.
from the, it's not like we're not selfish either, but for us in the factory, all we got to do now is run one tire, as opposed to size changing and making all the tool change to run a conventional IF and VF. So it streamlines the business, makes things simple. I'm a simple guy and I like simple things. So this is really going to be kind of a big deal when we get it off and rolling. So, and it's
Yeah,
going to be
for
on,
sure.
to start out on, it'll be on sprayer sizes.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Awesome.
Yep.
Well, looking forward to hearing more about that. That's for sure.
Yep.
Very
Yep.
cool. Very cool. So Scott, last question here. From your perspective, you meet with a lot of dealers. You said you just completed a training not too long ago. I'm sure you talk with a lot of farmers as well. So what types of ag tire issues do you feel exist in the industry today, and what technology, either from Titan or just in general in the industry, is being researched to solve these issues? Anything that really stands out to you that's kind of
Well,
coming down the pipeline?
for me, obviously, I've yet to have a manufacturer saying, at least in North America, a manufacturer come up and say, hey, you know what? I got this idea for this brand new piece of equipment. It's going to be 5,000 pounds lighter, and it's going to go 10 miles an hour slower, right? That just is not happening. So, machines are getting bigger, and speeds are getting faster. And to be able to build tires or design tires that are able to handle those loads and speeds is going to be the big challenge. And I think everybody's kind of on the cusp of, you're going to see in the next probably 3 or 4 years, tires get extremely big. We're already talking. We got a 1400, which is the largest. We got on the drawing board, even bigger yet, and we just released a R2 version of this 1400 that they're going to have down at Louisville as a product launch. But I just think you're going to see tires get larger, tractors are going to get larger, and for us, I guess on the manufacturing side, the equipment to be able to build that stuff is going to be a challenge for us to meet the market need. As far as any specific technology, I don't really see anything that's not already out there that can handle it. It's just what type of tire and what size of tire is it going to be? And
Right.
you've got sprayer manufacturers that are asking us for load indexes that are, and I've always said it with the IF and VF, they're one model change to going right back to 78 psi, and this year we're going to see it's getting close to that, because the machines are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but we're not getting an envelope bigger to be able to put more tire under there. So
Got it.
it's a
Got it.
challenge.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a challenge. You got the cameras now, the See and Sprays.
Mm-hmm.
You got all this really cool stuff, but you got a sprayer rolling at 72 psi inflation pressures, and then we got a tractor coming right back in at 6 psi. We're not really working together when it comes to controlling the compaction thing. So
Right.
that's a bit of a challenge in itself.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah. Well, lots of interesting technology is out there, like you said, and Titan is always, I know, innovating around what's coming out, and we're obviously interested to see what's coming down the pipe.
Oh
But,
yeah, it's gonna be a fun few years here for sure. In the
yeah,
next
yeah.
5 years.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting. And of course, the ag tire sector is also impacted by right to repair and
Yep.
electric vehicles too, and electric
Mhm.
equipment and stuff. So
Well, and then
there's so
the
much.
funny part is, I always kid people that you can have the biggest transmissions and the biggest motors and the fanciest spray booms, but it's not going to go anywhere without black tires and wheels on there. So we're always going to be around, whether it's driven by electric or gas or soybean oil or whatever we decide is the next best thing, right? I think that from a ag tire sector, I think the future's pretty bright.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, great note to end on. Scott, thank you so much. I so appreciate your time today and your expertise. Is there anything you'd like to say about, emerging tire technology or anything that we didn't touch on that you'd like dealers to know?
No, I think we touched on it, and again, you don't have to be the as far as an industry, you don't have to be first with everything, right? But you just got to be consistent and good at it. And I
Right.
think whether you're competitors or us, I think the end user needs to understand that the tires are more capable than what they think they are. And they don't know they have a problem until because they don't even know they have a problem. And that's where our
Mm.
tire dealers, and I encourage people to reach out to their tire dealers, ask questions. If they're really concerned about compaction or things like that, they're out there to help. And there's a lot that can be done if they just got to be willing to do it. So, and that's what we're here for.
Awesome. Well, Scott, great advice. Thanks so much for your time again. We really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.